Hey, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us on Good Movie Monday.
Hey, it is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now,
Talk about good movies.
yeah, I, we're here ostensibly to talk about your latest film, Test Screening, which is playing at Monster Fest, starting October 3rd, and then in Melbourne, and then traveling around Australia, later in the month. But I kind of want to go back a bit first. Uh, Now, can you tell me what kind of movies do you remember watching as a kid?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I watched everything. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and there wasn't a ton to do except for the mall and the roller rink and the movie theater. And fortunately, we actually had a drive-in that was doing very, very well back then. So I got to grow up going to the drive-in and going to we had a cinema called the Barn Cinema, and it was a movie theater in an old barn. And it's nicer, it was nicer than it sounds, but it was still a barn. And that was just kind of my that and books were kind of my dreamscape back then. And growing up in the 80s, it was the prime time for the horror VHS video store. And the video store where I grew up was very, very small, and they kept the horror back where the porn was. They kept it behind an 18 plus curtain, so it took me a little while to discover the uh the treasure trove of box covers of box art. But once I did, I was pretty much hooked. So I kind of grew up loving all kinds of movies. I loved Spielberg. I loved thrillers. I loved really good dramas. They filmed Witness in Lancaster, which is where I grew up, and so I had a
Wow.
special affinity for those sorts of movies, and I really just loved everything. And I still do, but I sort of got a special affinity with horror because I loved horror short stories, and I grew up reading, Ray Bradbury and Stephen King, and watching, the Alfred Hitchcock TV series, and I just had a special affinity for kind of the darker subject matter. Um,
Well, if
so I
you
don't know. I guess you could say the movies that formed me the most were in terms of that were like The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Jacob's Ladder, probably, and Flatliners, I think were kind of the four that locked in horror as my special place.
if you grew up in Pennsylvania, that means that's where Creepshow is set, isn't it? That's Meteor
I think
shit.
so.
That's Stephen King. Stephen King was there.
Is it? I remember a lot of his stuff is set in Maine, and I can't remember if that story was Pennsylvania or Maine. Because a lot of his stuff is like in
Is
and around
yeah,
Bangor and
Bangor,
and,
yeah.
and Maine communities. But yeah, there's a lot of, where New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is kind of where I hung my hat for most of my teenage years, is considered by many to be one of the most haunted places in the country. And everybody there like has a ghost in their house, and just kind of hates them because they're annoying. Like it was a completely different take on what I remember when I was moving there from Lancaster. I was really excited to be moving to the most haunted city in the country. That's what they said. And when I got there, everyone's like, "Ugh, the ghosts are so annoying. They do nothing but cause problems." They treated it like it was the most mundane thing in the world. My friend had a ghost that wouldn't let his dad watch baseball games and kept changing the channel. And I actually witnessed this, and it was quite shocking. But yeah, so it kind of permeated that area, and it still sort of does. Like that's where M. Night shoots all of his stuff. Signs and all of his early movies in particular were filmed in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So yeah, it was a neat place to come from.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you've kind of answered this. So, and now your previous answer has actually spawned a second question. But as a child of the 80s, were you a cinema kid or were you a video store kid? Where
Mm.
did you live?
I lived in the library, actually. The library was kind of my number one haunt. I was a big reader. And it makes sense that later on I do most of what I do, or a lot of what I do, is adaptations because I love books and I love cinema. So I would say it's primarily library, and when not library, movie theater. Video store, the Blockbuster and the Hollywood videos kind of came later. They kind of showed up when I was like 16. My video store was connected to a gas station at the intersection of a place called Peddler's Village, which was a place where New Yorkers would come on the weekends and shop. And um, It was really, really small, and I mean, I knew the clerk. I had to, kind of work that relationship to get him to allow me to rent horror movies at 12 and 13, and uh, so yeah, I wasn't so much a video store kid because they weren't that pop. They kind of hadn't really arrived in my community when I was there.
when you're there. So, and my follow-up question to you telling me that you had a drive-in was, were teen sex comedies of the 80s telling the truth? Were drive-ins a villainous den of inequity, or were they just
Not,
lovely, wholesome?
not for me. I'm sure for people who are much cooler than me, they were. Um, but not for me. No, for me, it was just my friends who happened to be cinema geeks as well. Because you could see two movies for cheap and sometimes even three. And then when dating arrived, it was a little bit more chaste for me.
Yeah,
But yes, there was lots of action going on around any vehicle that I happened to be in, I'm sure.
yeah.
They were hives of scum and villainy for certain.
Yes, yeah. Once again, movies have lied to me my entire life. Like I, yeah, I don't recall any high school sex when I was. Yeah, the high schools were not like they were in late night TV movies, which are the ones that I used to watch a lot.
Definitely not.
Where's this?
No, for me it was kind of like where it was more about cable showed up when I was like 9 or 10. We had when we lived in Lancaster, the people on my side of the street got something called Prism, and people on the other side of the street got something called HBO. And it was just a box that sits on top of your television, and it says TV or Prism, or TV or cable. And the box showed up when I was 9, I think, and my parents were like, "Don't ever touch that box. That's not for you." So obviously, the very first night it arrived, after they went to bed, I stayed up until 1 in the morning. Waited until they were asleep, and then I came down and got really close in front of the television and turned it on, and kept the volume really low, and turned the dial, and caught the final 10 seconds of the 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers with just, you know, walking down the street, sees a guy turns to her and does the thing, and immediately just turned the television off and was like, "Oh my God, what the fuck was that?" So cable became my main line for a while.
Yeah, it's, yeah, so good. Now I do like a lot of the time on these kind of podcasts, people ask, what movies did you watch that made you want to get into making films? I want to know, what movies did you watch that you went, this is terrible. I can do better than this.
Wow, I don't know. I don't know. I think I watched so many horror films when I was a teenager and a late teen, because I was just we were talking about this a little bit offline, just how when you get into horror you just start trying to absorb everything that you could possibly get your hands on, and it was a different time, that there was no streaming and theatrical windows for horror films, were unless they were big horror movies, they didn't really happen. So it was kind of all about video. So I think what happened was I ended up seeing really high grade, kind of erudite, really well crafted horror, just in conjunction with Ghoulies 3, right? Like, I would watch The Changeling, and then I'd watch Ghoulies 3, and then I'd watch The Exorcist, and then I would watch, Sleepaway Camp 2 or whatever. And it was not that that's bad. I kind of love that one,
No,
but like they kind of were so mashed together because I didn't really have the there was no internet. There was no one else that really loved horror that I was growing up with. So there was no one to be like, okay, here's the movies you should be watching. Like I just kind of experienced it all at once. So it was less like, well, I can do better than that. And it was more about like, well, I like that one more than I like that one. I like that one more than that one. And I sort of just developed a different kind of sensibility, I guess. And but at the same time, I kind of loved it all. Like I loved the ones that were just, the sexy, juicy ones, and then I liked the ones that were kind of trying to, scrape at something a little bit more elegant. I just kind of liked it all.
yeah. So I can tell just by that story, I know that I was the wrong kind of kid because I was the one going, "Ooh, Ghoulies 3, much better than The Exorcist," which is the, and now as an adult, you're like, what was I thinking? I don't see them.
And my friends and I, I remember I was Ghoulies 2 or Ghoulies 3 that we had an event because we loved the first couple movies so much that like when it was gonna land, we like made a date, got together, to watch it together. Like those movies had their charms, but I think it was all just like it all felt transgressive. I don't know, in the 80s it was like parents were alarmed about everything. So it was all just kind of transgressive. Like my neighbors my neighbors who was like 4 years older than me was a huge Kiss fan. And I had that experience of being like, don't go to his house if he's listening to that music. And it's just like, because the covers are satanic. And I remember like years later, I listened to Kiss. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this is really
It's all
like
about love
they're
guns.
singing about getting laid on a Saturday night. Like this is not like really.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. So
my parents did the same thing with I used to read a lot of Dragon. Geez, I'm really highlighting how much of a nerd I am. I used to read a lot of Dragonlance and Dungeons and Dragons novels. Did not
oh,
even play.
dude,
I
I
didn't even
love
play the game. I just loved reading the novels, and my parents were convinced I was going to walk down Burke Street, which is our kind of main drag in the middle of Melbourne, with a giant sword and be shot by police for
Oh
threatening
my
people.
God.
It's like,
Dude, that's hilarious. Wow. I was really into Dragonlance. And by the way, there's I bought a newer version for my daughter because she's gotten a fantasy a couple years ago. And there was a really wonderful new introduction by I think it was Margaret or Tracy, and talking about how it all came about, how Dragonlance sort of happened in support of Dungeons and Dragons. And it's a remarkable story. If
yeah,
you've
no.
never read this, you should check it out. It's pretty fascinating.
No, definitely. I was always much more Dragonlance than Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or any of those other. I was always a Margaret Weis, Tracy Hickman stan, as the kids say. Uh,
Yeah, me too.
in the
I'm
day.
right there with you, man. I'm right there with you. But I was also partially because the kids who were really into The Hobbit and the Tolkien stuff summarily judged me as not cool enough to get into Tolkien. Like they were like, "Oh, The Hobbit's too much for you," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I didn't, I just and then the other kids were the comic book kids, and I never got into comic books when I was a kid because of the same reason. They were too cool for school. They were like. No, you're into movies. Like that's nothing on comic books.
Yeah.
So
We're up
I
to
didn't
issue
read comics until
570.
many years later.
Yeah, we're up to issue 578. You're never going to catch up.
No, no,
This
no, no. It's too much. It's too much for your tiny little puny human brain.
but
Just watch
then
your movies.
then you get to lord it all over them by working on a Brother Voodoo TV series that unfortunately didn't
Yeah.
happen. But what an like an obscure great character to be able to bring to life
Oh
potentially.
man, yeah. It's one of my many so it's actually one of my greater frustrations, I think. Oh, look at that. You're
Let's go.
kidding. There you
There's a
go.
couple
Yeah.
there. Here we go.
It's so crazy because that TV show I mean, we developed it before the newer kind of Marvel. I mean, that was, Kevin Feige was the guy, and Ari Arad but it was like 2002 or 2003, so it was, well before Iron Man and well before the new incarnation. And man, I just like once the new stuff started landing, they started doing stuff for TV. I was like, guys, like this TV show, come on, let's
You've
let's
got it.
bring this thing out. And I don't know. I think we developed it with Sci-Fi Channel, so I don't know if there was like a rights issue, but also I think I had heard that they were kind of going to wind Brother Voodoo into the Black Panther the second movie, but then obviously they had to change course with what happened there. So I don't know, but that was one of my favorite things I had ever worked on. That would have been really really interesting television. It was all about New Orleans and how New Orleans was just this really fascinating collision of so many different cultures, and it was sort of the idea that it was a sensitive area, and a lot of different sort of spiritual, philosophical and religious communities had sort of come together and created a little bit of like a bureau. and in spite of their differences, in recognition of the fact that it was kind of a hot zone, like a ley line,
Yeah.
and that how New Orleans was doing was going to affect a lot of other areas. So it was a really fun opportunity to kind of explore some fascinating, morality questions and do some really really cool stuff with magic and visuals and different belief systems and kind of talk about America too, as a place of collision. But wrong time. Maybe we were ahead of our time. Who
Every
knows?
time,
But
yeah. Well, it's, I
bad
mean,
about that.
yeah, it's well, I mean, look, I guess at that time too, DC were really, kicking goals with the TV, and Marvel you know, hadn't really come into its own at that point. So yeah,
Yeah.
I find it so weird that at one point, was it Corman had the rights to Marvel because
Yeah.
nobody cared, like no one thought that there was any interest in it, and
Yeah, because he do a Fantastic Four? He did a Fantastic
yeah,
Four movie, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I've heard about it.
it's
Yeah,
not,
and the Rods had just done. I mean, they'd had success with Spider-Man. They'd launched that with
yeah,
Sam Raimi. That done really, it was an amazing film, and um, so yeah, I think they were. You could tell, like they knew it was a moment that was emergent, like that they
yeah,
finally were kind of getting. It was because I remember in talking with Kevin and developing the series, you could tell there was an enormous amount of care about what the show was, how it was going to sort of translate. Um, and you could tell there was a bit of friction because TV at that time was still, you know, commercial based, even even something like the Sci-Fi Channel was still about selling commercials, and there was a little bit of creative tension you could tell. But yeah, I mean it was very obvious that Kevin had really really huge plans for Marvel, so it was
yeah.
it was interesting to sort of see that moment.
I mean, I still love that period of TV. I don't like it when I watch a TV show and there isn't a part where it blacks out for the ad and then comes back immediately if I watch something on streaming, I'm like, oh, this isn't a real TV show.
Yeah. Like what? I feel like we should have had the fade to black by now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
they
funny
should.
because I'd explain that to my son because my son would watch, old series that we would have, and he'd be like, "Why do they do that?" And I was like, "There's these things called commercials." But
Yeah,
now they see them because they watch so many things on YouTube,
yeah.
and so now they know what commercials are.
That's that's what's so frustrating. Like on Amazon Prime and stuff, that they have the ads now, but
Oh,
they just
yeah,
randomly will drop in, and no care has been put into where the ads should go on the show. And you're like, oh, this is
yeah,
just what?
yeah. It's really aggravating because they're dropping ads into movies now too. Although I think I think they got some pushback, and now what they're trying to do is they show you like 4 minutes of ads before the movie, and
Yeah,
then if you pause it or you stop it and you come back to it, then they'll show you more ads. But I think they're trying to respect the integrity of the features a little bit more. But
yeah,
yeah, it's really strange to watch the world kind of go full circle and have to reintroduce my children to what
yeah,
commercials are after
yeah,
describing them like they were some ancient plague on our land.
yeah. I feel like I've gotten to the point like my parents were in when they had to explain that no, we watched the moon landing in the window of a shop because we didn't have a TV in our house.
Yes.
Like, oh,
True. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an impossible. You'll never win the battle of trying to get your kids to appreciate the fact that they can watch any movie anytime they want on
yeah,
Amazon. They can just pay $3.99 and start it. And that was not, they have no way of recognizing how
yeah.
incredible that was.
I can't even get my nieces to watch physical media. Like,
Mhm.
when my niece started getting into Buffy and Angel, Angel wasn't on any streaming platform here, and so I was like, well, here are all the DVDs of it, and she's like, how do I what do you what are these? And I was like, no, 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 I don't
Yeah. It changes
never
very
say that to
quickly.
me. Yeah, never say that to me. What are these? I blame your mother. Yeah, no,
It's got to be her fault.
yeah. Now, I I always love that when you look someone up on IMDb, when you look at their first credit, it's always as if they just walked into Hollywood and all of a sudden, hey, Stephen, here is The Grudge.
Hmm.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah.
First job.
Oh yeah, it was just like that. It was just like that.
So can you tell us what's your breaking in story? How did you actually get into the glitzy world of film and television?
Well, gosh, that's a strange one. I mean, I made, when I was at college, I was rolling around a bit more in film and theater and stuff because it was the first time I sort of had a chance to growing up where I grew up. Um, and I'd never seen a screenplay until I went to college because I loved movies and I loved books and I never saw the bridge and I never saw what a TV show comes from, what a movie comes from. So when I read my first screenplay, I kind of started writing screenplays while I was in college. I was reading a Stephen King book at the time, and that was the first thing I ever adapted. And so I did a lot of that, and I made a bunch of films. And I was lucky because Hollywood came to my town. I went to Notre Dame, and they filmed Rudy when I was there, and that was like
Wow.
that was it. There was no turning back from that. Like that was
I was
quite a
ho-
moment. And
I was hoping you were going to say they came to your town for a test screening.
no, no, it's kind of part of where test screening comes from is that whole thing because it felt like Hollywood showed up and although in this version it was very very nice. It was the people who made the movie, the producers and the filmmaker and the screenwriter were really really amazing, really giving people and they included students from the theater program and they said have them come by. We'll stick them in the movie somewhere, and the director would just let me hang out and do not. I missed months of classes because I was, just going wherever they were filming. I was finding something to do there, and just got completely addicted to it. So it was like, well, I could either go to law school or I could try to do this. And I made a short film that won a Student Academy Award. And or was nominated for it won like a regional winner in the Midwest and then but that was enough to get me to fly out to LA to see if it was going to win in the nation. It didn't, but it brought me to a table with a bunch of people who knew more about film than me, and they were all like, "So are you going to go to film school?" And I was like, "You can go to school for this? Are you serious?" Like, I was planning on doing something far more, you know, in line with I guess my parents' hopes and expectations for my life, law school or whatever, and so yeah, so I just took a lot of notes, and they're like, "Yep, these are the schools: USC, NYU, AFI, UCLA." Back at that point in the early '90s, film was not yet fully democratized. So you had some schools that just had most of the equipment, most of the alumni, and USC fucked up and let me in. So I packed up and moved out there and started at USC, and I was fortunate because right away I met a guy who was there on like the 7 year plan, and he was like, "Don't rely on the school to get you a job. This is everybody comes here and wants to do this." And he gave me great advice. He just said, "Keep writing and get an internship at a movie studio and learn a technical craft." And so I got an internship right away and got a job alphabetizing a script library at a production company at Warner Brothers um, and then that kind of worked for me because I ended up meeting a lot of producers and listening to phone calls, and I learned more about how Hollywood works kind of behind the curtain than I ever would have learned while I was at film school. Like I kind of was boots on the ground getting yelled at because the toast that I was making for somebody wasn't good enough, or
I was I
watching
was
Sylvester.
I was literally just going to ask how real is swimming with sharks, and you've answered that question.
Oh man, it was 100% accurate. It was 100% accurate. Well, it was fun because my second semester, I was at an independent production company first, and they had done great. They were doing interesting stuff. They had just done Fearless with Jeff Bridges. Um, they were producing a Simple Plan. I think a version before Sam Raimi became involved. And so I learned a lot about development. And then the second semester, I moved to Joel Silver's company, which was awesome for me because like I love Joel Silver's movies, but it was crazy. I mean, it was the Hollywood shop. It was, Sylvester Stallone would come by and um Joel Silver would be screaming at people and it would trickle downhill and I knew someone was going to start yelling at me any moment and I would try to hide and um but it was again like an incredible education. But what also happened was I was able to build relationships with people so that at a certain point I could say, "Hey, would you mind taking a look at this script that I wrote and see if it's like any good or if I'm totally off the mark?" And they were just really giving people who were willing to give notes and pass it around. And the first script, almost Warner Brothers almost bought it. Actually, it was something I'd written with a friend of mine, and they took it to Warner Brothers, and Warner's passed, but it caused one of the producers to hand me an independent script he was developing and say, "Hey, do you want to do work on this? I can't pay you, but I think there's potential in there." And I met the director, this guy named John, and I just worked on it between classes for free, and nothing ever came of it. And went home for the summer, and I came back in the fall, and I got a phone call randomly from New Line Cinema in New York, and they're like, "We love the script that you and your screenwriting your partner wrote." And I was like, my partner, like, and it turned out that the filmmaker had done a little bit of work on it and had put his name on the script, with an ampersand, which meant we were partners. And they basically said, "We want to fly you guys out to New York to meet to pitch this book called Bone in the Throat," which was written by this really popular chef I'd never heard of called Tony Bourdain. And and like next thing I knew, we were sitting there like neither one of us had ever been flown anywhere, let alone first class. And also he had put his name on the script, and I didn't know what he had changed, so there was a little bit of tension. But we're sitting here reading this book really fast, and we pitched Mike DeLuca, and Ted Demme was the filmmaker, and Tony, and we got the job. And that was my first. Suddenly, I was like getting paid to be a screenwriter, and so that was fall 1996. That was my first gig.
Wow.
Um, and but after revising it and doing drafts for a couple years, I graduated from school a couple years later, and I'd made $8,000 on it. And I hadn't gotten job number two, and I was like, I thought I was off. I thought I was off and running as a screenwriter. I don't know, like, what do I do? And the new director had Ted Demme had passed away, and a new director had come on, and he was really kind, and he said, "Let me call my agent. Maybe he'll read the script and see if he can help you out in any way." And he was kind of the magic sauce that came on. I'd never had an agent before, and he really liked the work, and he got me job two and job three, and on and on and on. But I was essentially, sorry, that was a long way around to answer your question. But
No, that's
I was
great.
sort of in I was sort of an in the trenches screenwriter from 1996 to 2002. I was just doing a lot of um, writing for a lot of interesting people, a lot of interesting projects. I wrote a movie for Mike Nichols and John Leguizamo, which was an amazing experience because I was a huge Mike Nichols fan, and I did a romantic comedy for Jennifer Love Hewitt. We kind of wrote all over the map. I
Yeah,
only
wow.
did one horror movie, but the other five that this guy and I wrote together were all thrillers and comedies, and they were all sorts of things. Um, and then we ended up our partnership sort of fractured, and my rep said, "Well, you have to write some new stuff because you kind of have to start over." And you seem to like horror, and horror is kind of big. I think it was 1999, so Blair Witch Project had just come out, and I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to write a couple horror movies." So I wrote a couple, and that led to some meetings and some work. And then I had the incredible fortune of having a general meeting with someone named Roy Lee, and in 2001, I think, and he was working on in post with Gore Verbinski on The Ring, and he was sort of astonished that I had seen Ringu, and I was a huge fan, and I was astonished that he was making The Ring, and we just kind of had common ground in this meeting, and he said, let me. He's like, I've never like Asian horror is like totally undiscovered. I just got this thing from Japan. It doesn't have subtitles on it. I don't understand it. Like but it's crazy and it's terrifying. And let me show you some stuff. And he just like closed the curtains in the middle of the day and started showing me scenes from Ju-on, Takashi Shimizu's like TV thing. And it would just rock my world. And that conversation turned into The Grudge 2 years later. It was just
Amazing.
so yeah, so I'd written like 25, I think. I think The Grudge was my 25th script, but it was my first produced film. So yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
it was not a one-off for me.
Yeah. It's a big thing I learned. You should never trust IMDb because it only tells you part of the story.
Yeah, that's what's really fun. You know, I love talking with other screenwriters and filmmakers and stuff because no one has the same story. Like everybody's story into Hollywood is circuitous and bizarre and that's kind of what I love about it though, because it sends the message to like young people and people that want to break in, which is that like anybody can do it. Like at any time in their lives. Like it seems insurmountable and it seems distant and weird. But it's not like, you know, you have to dedicate yourself to it and it takes a lot of hard work, but the doors are open for anybody, really. And
Yeah,
it's only been more so since I've been there. It's only gotten friendlier and friendlier. And I think that's my favorite thing about horror too, is that it's pretty much the genre for outside voices. Like it's always revitalized as a genre by somebody who comes in and says, I don't know what the fucking rules are, but here's what I think is scary. And they just make something and
yeah,
Hollywood gets on board with it and it changes everything, you know? It's pretty incredible genre space to work in.
yeah, definitely, 100%. Now, after The Grudge, the two Grudge films, your next produced credit is one of my favorite films, Red. Uh,
That's one of your favorite films?
I love
Oh my
Red.
God.
Red
Wow.
is great. Well, look, as a
No,
lifelong dog
that's so
fan,
cool to hear.
and I
Yeah.
do want to know, was there ever just a draft of that screenplay that only went for 20 minutes and it's after after Brian Cox knocks on Tom Sizemore's door and demands an explanation and Tom Sizemore goes, "Nah," he just pulls out a shotgun and blows that entire family away.
Well, yes, we've definitely joked over the years about how if we'd only have him grab that gun earlier, we would have had John Wick like a
Yeah.
long time in advance. But no, we decided that we were going to take the more dramatic approach. No, it just came from the book. You know, that book was just, you know, as a writer who writes very pulpy stuff, that particular book just blew me away because it was this kind of exercise in restraint. Um, and this really fascinating exploration of like the limits of justice, which is something I've always sort of been curious about. In fact, The Grudge kind of has its roots there as well. Um, and so no, there wasn't. It was always a very modulated script. There was always this tension of the audience kind of wondering, oh God, when is this guy gonna, when is he gonna go off the rails? And he kind of never does until other people go off the rails, and even then he tries not to,
Yeah.
really go into a place of violence. And I loved that kind of care of a story and the way that it really made you think about, if you were in those shoes, what you would do, which is where I think film really works effectively,
Yeah. I don't think
Um,
I don't think those boys would have left the forest at the beginning had it been had it been me and I would have had an option at the time.
yeah.
It's one of those things that you like. I went to see One Battle After Another last night,
Mm,
and I kind of watching that film, which is great, but I realized that I'm much more uh, I enjoy movies that are much more motivated by revenge than I am about political ideology. Like revenge is
mm,
just so much more real.
yeah.
This and
Yeah.
it's you always these people kind of feel bad about the need for revenge, and I'm like, no, revenge is great. Get that revenge, go get it.
Yeah, I remember reading something about, it was sort of an analysis about why those films are so popular, and it sort of talked about how um, we live in a time where we question what we're told about justice. We sort of question that our legal structures are delivering it appropriately. Like we see so many people getting away with so many things,
Yeah,
and it's a frustration that bubbles up. Um, and that horror films kind of give you this little exorcism of this
yeah,
is what should fucking happen, right? Like, right? Like it's kind of
yeah,
and 'cause I think that's cyclical too. I think that's like where the Death Wish movies kind of came from as well,
yeah,
and
totally. But even things like changing lanes, where it's you cut me off in traffic, I'm going to destroy
yeah.
your life.
Oh man, I mean, First Blood was really formative for me. Like, what an incredible movie! And it's so funny because like you talk to people now that didn't grow up in that era, and they kind of tend to poo-poo '80s movies without having seen them. Like they poo-poo Top Gun as this macho movie, and it's like you need to watch it because it's actually about yes, it is about macho, but it's about being humbled. It's about the problem
Yeah.
with being that way. And the First Blood ends with a psychological breakdown.
Yeah.
It doesn't end in a gunfight. It ends with a breakdown. And those movies really have, they have some fascinating magic to them. They really
Yeah.
do.
It's not all topless volleyball or greased up volleyball on the
No.
beach.
Yeah.
That's
That
just
makes
in
that
the
that
trailer.
gets you the trailer and that gets
Yeah.
you in the door. But then it's like Ferris Bueller, right? Like Ferris Bueller slides the knife in, at these certain moments and really kind of makes you think about stuff. And Breakfast Club and these movies were just really, really, really incredible at that time. And I think that's kind of what I always wanted to do, and that's why, after The Grudge got made, it was very much like all horror. Nobody wanted to talk to me about anything that wasn't horror, which is fine for me for a while but horror is sometimes hard to do at the studio level. To try to do it well or properly sometimes it's challenging just given the nature of Hollywood. So right away I wanted to start producing things that were the stories that I grew up on. And that's kind of where Red came from, and where Beyond the Reach came from. We're trying to, saying, well, as a writer, it's going to be a little bit of, what people are looking for from me, but producing stuff allowed me to kind of explore some of those other, narrative forms that I was interested in as well.
Yeah. Well, and then you got to work on the in the Toby Hooper universe with Texas Chainsaw 3D, which is a phenomenal film that we also played at Monster Fest last year. We did a 3D, we did a 3D weekend, and
Oh,
uh, and
nice.
and that film was had pride of place, and which
Mm.
I thoroughly enjoyed. But that actually is a very different take on the whole Sawyer family mythos, because that is also has is a bit more about kind of revenge. Funnily enough, it is about, this, the whole town has turned on this family, and then the family kind of, the surviving member of the family kind of gets his revenge on the town, even, not even intentionally, really. He just gets let out of the basement, and
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah. That was
has
that
his
was an
way
interesting
with
experience.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that it went through a lot of changes, and I mean the people the people who deserve the credit for that movie, are definitely people who came after me as a screenwriter, because I had a there were seeds that of things that I had come up with that ended up in the film. Um, but the writers who delivered that home, I thought, really did a good job, because they managed to create to widen the window a little bit of what those movies were sort of exploring, and that's kind of what I'd been trying to do. I'd sort of developed a trilogy that was going to be like one long movie, but playing out over sort of three, and we were gonna film it kind of the same way. Like the whole idea was to pretend that the other movies that had come since the first one didn't really happen, and that the movie was going to begin in the back of the truck with Sally Hardesty just escaping that moment, and it was going to be shot 16 millimeter and handheld, and we were going to make it for, we were going to make all three for $10 million total, and it was going to, it was. And the trilogy that we created was really kind of about exploring all the questions that the first movie sort of left unanswered.
yeah,
Um, and that's a challenge to do, but I felt like, the team that got 3D over the finish line, I think, did a really good job kind of delivering on every level of what was going to make that movie, a fun ride and a successful ride, and something that was a little different as well.
yeah. I would love to know what came first, that they were going to do it in 3D, or that they cast Alexandra Daddario. That question has always
Well, the 3D definitely came first, but
came
I could
first, right?
totally see. I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah. No, it was funny. The 3D thing was that was kind of a studio mandate, and the draft that I wrote, I wrote like a 3D screed about how I felt 3D should be used. Because I was worried about it kind of being like oh, I'm sweeping the floor. Oops, look at the camera, or um, I think I had pointed it, was it Avatar? And it was talking about like really using depth to put the audience into scenes. So like I'd written a scene where someone was under a table as Leatherface is carving someone up above the table, and sort of used
Yeah.
and so I wrote everything that was in 3D. I actually in my version of the script I actually put in 3D in the script, and I added like this is how it will play because it's such an amazing tool if you really think about how to use it carefully, you know.
Yeah. Unlike
Um,
yeah, Friday the 13th part 3, where there's, oh, let's have the yo-yo bounce in the face for,
right.
for 5 minutes, and you're like, I mean, this is cool, but
Yeah, like it can kind of, you know, it can work in a lot of different ways, but there
yeah,
was something to me like I just Leatherface has always been really intriguing to me because when you kind of put him among the pantheon of, you know, Mike Myers and Freddy Krueger and kind of the familiar icons, the the question of what Leatherface is more primal in a way, you know,
yeah,
because he's kind of a cipher and there's this very unnerving feeling that he kind of doesn't really he doesn't think about what he's doing. He's just doing what he's been told to do.
yeah,
And there's something so unpleasant about that that we were always talking about how like you have to kind of almost treat that really seriously. Like that
yeah,
Leatherface kind of needs to be more earnest. You know, you can't drift off into like the playfulness of Freddy Krueger and where that became or the triviality of 3D and Friday the 13th, like you said, like
yeah,
it is a way to use 3D to make the audience even more uncomfortable about the idea of Leatherface and cannibalism and what's happening here. Then,
yeah.
man, you could have something really. But the studio mandate also included it couldn't be, it had to be rated PG-13. There couldn't be any cannibalism. It was a very complicated
Yeah, right. A lot of
playground to try to maneuver in. I mean
yeah,
that's why it's called Texas Chainsaw 3D. They took the word massacre out,
yeah,
you know. So I don't know why. I mean, you know, these decisions are made at a pay grade that is far above mine. But sometimes you just have to navigate with that flow.
it didn't occur to me until you just mentioned it that yeah, there is no cannibalism in it.
Nope.
It didn't even, I mean, like there's, yeah, it doesn't really get to that point, but yeah, whereas obviously missing, it isn't there. Yeah,
No cannibalism, no massacres.
no,
It's
yes, yeah,
very, very different, very different. But yeah, and I'm excited to see where they take it now because obviously they're I don't know if you've been following it, but they're handling it with kid gloves now, and there's some really fast. I think Roy is in fact is one of the people that I think is in a pole position to maybe get it. And I think he's working with JT Molnar, who he did Long Walk with, and he did Strange Darling.
yeah,
I don't
right.
know.
Long walk.
Fingers crossed on that. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that would be pretty awesome to get that kind of producer director pairing.
yeah. I mean, I'm glad that in the last one, at least they got over the no massacre part because the last one, I mean, actually,
Yeah,
I don't know if there's not much cannibalism in there, but that bus scene is,
I
you know,
love
a
that.
fantastic, example of
Yeah,
what should happen to or influencers worldwide.
100%.
Right?
100%. Actually, I have to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Shintaro Shimasawa. Shintaro was really he was an integral part of the Grudge happening. At the beginning, it was me and Roy Lee and Shin. And Shin was one of the producers on that, and he's actually in the bus scene. He
Yeah,
has like he wanted to get carved up, and he
yeah,
gets carved
yeah,
up quite effectively. And he's a great dude and a wonderful producer and a really good director too. But yeah, I think he's part of the reason that movie turned out that one turned out really well.
yeah, right. Awesome. I'm glad that. I mean, I know it's never going to go away. Like that movie is too influential in the world of horror to ever actually disappear. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm glad that it's being handled by people who care, which is great. Now, look, we should talk about test screening because that's that's why we're here.
sure.
And
I'm here for it all, man. Whatever you want to talk.
yeah. Now, so for people who aren't familiar and haven't jumped on the Monster Fest website and read up about it, or in all of the trades, what's the elevator pitch for test screening?
Elevator pitch. Okay. Small town, Oregon, 1982. Um, a bunch of friends, one of whom works in the local cinema, are thrilled to discover that Hollywood is coming to their small town with a test screening that ends up not being a Hollywood movie at all, but being something darker and more malicious. And it came from lots of conversations with a filmmaker friend of mine, but one in particular where we had the same influences. We both kind of really loved Spielberg Carpenter and Cronenberg and said, "Could you do all three of those guys in one movie?" And test screening was sort of an attempt to try to do that. So it's got a little bit for everybody, I think.
Now, as you mentioned, the film is very specifically set in 1982. What is it about 1982 that made it the perfect place setting for this film?
Well, a couple things. I think one was that it was kind of when I really fell in love with movies. I was definitely flirting with movies before then, but there was something about that year, Poltergeist, Tron, Blade Runner. I mean, The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. That's I think is one of the all-time best years of American cinema was 1982. And um, and also, the sort of metaphor of the movie, the kind of thing that we were trying to unpack about today's world was being explored in a bunch of movies that were very didactic, but also very much set in the present. And I think we kind of wanted to look at it through the lens of the past, probably just out of frustration that some things that we were dealing with back then we're still dealing with now, and how that's kind of crummy that 40 years later we're still dealing with the erosion of individual rights, and a lot of things that we would just have a lot of late night drinky conversations about. And back and back around that age when I was a kid was the first time that I sort of discovered that I had friends who were gay, and the movie obviously has a little component of that. And so it just sort of made sense, to kind of try to explore the now through the lens of the past, I guess.
Well, I was going to say one of the kind of the themes in the film, I guess, is that the town's repressed horniness leads to their kind of their downfall. So-
That's a good elevator pitch too, by the way. I mean, that's
yeah.
a lot of people have said this is a lot like society, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah, I was going to
absolutely.
say
It
it's
was
a lot
society.
like Impulse, which
Yeah,
which I only watched for the first time, but it has that great and the crazies, but
yes, yes.
but
Those were
without
those
the
were all
violence.
influences.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, without the violence, much more. But I'm a big fan of the of the because it's the David Lynch thing where the seamy underside of small town America that's kind of always present, and in this film it's the outside influence that acts as the catalyst to bring
yeah,
that you know the seamy underside, especially with the priest father character and the all the parental figures in the film whose lives have kind of seemingly you know what's the term, but they've kind of they're not as great as they imagine they would be when they're in high school kind of thing, and they're just you know living their lives kind of thing, and you've got that
yeah. I
kind
mean,
of
1982, like it has kind of been, it's been Stranger Things, I guess you could say, and like the early 80s were still very much like the late 70s for most of America. Like they could not afford the 80s,
yeah
in a lot of America. We were still
yeah
It was a terrible economy in 82, almost caused Reagan to lose. Um, and there was a lot of weariness, there was a lot of weariness. There was a lot of faded optimism. Um, but it was also very much a time, one of my favorite kinds of movies growing up were paranoia films from the 70s. And Parallax View, and I mean 7 Days in May. I mean, I love those fucking movies, and even Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like,
Body Snatchers is the perfect paranoia
ugh,
film. The
it's
two of them,
incredible.
or
Yeah, it's incredible.
all four of them, or how many there have been, they're all excellent. I love them all.
Oh yeah, I love the Abel Ferrara one. I don't know why like no one has seen this fucking movie, and it's one
Yeah,
of my favorites. I think I prefer the Kaufman one still ultimately, but like the Abel Ferrara one is phenomenal, and it just didn't. It's so underseen. Gabrielle Anwar and man.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
And now you're talking
those are
about
movies that like those movies really showed me the flexibility of horror, and how horror is actually this phenomenal delivery system where you can really unpack something without an audience even necessarily sensing what it is you're getting at, and maybe then it kind of lingers, maybe makes them think about stuff in a new way and they don't even really realize it. The Thing obviously was very much talking about, that was a Red Scare movie, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers to a certain extent was as well. And I think, test screening, that was kind of something we wanted to explore as well, is the sort of notion of that I think we're all still facing today, not just in terms of rights, but also this downward pressure of various kinds of puppet masters who are just desperately trying to corral us to act in the way that is most manageable, or most profitable for them, whether it's on a commercial sensibility, whether it's a political sensibility, however you slice it. It's that, and I think that's why there's a lot of Carpenter in the movie too, is because his movies were really full of that. In fact, we had a really wonderful moment when we filmed this in Portland, Oregon. And there was a theater there, I think it was called the Hollywood. And we found out that the night before we were going to start shooting, they always did retrospectives and they were showing They Live. And none of our young actors had even heard of They Live. So we were like, all right, we're going. Like, night before day one, we all went and saw They Live. And everyone's like, oh, it's on the page.
Mm.
They
And
totally
I
sort
hope
of
that when
got,
they came out of the cinema, you just handed them all sunglasses, just like not saying anything,
exactly.
just here you go.
It was just fun though, because it was kind of the same prism that we were exploring. A lot of the stuff that Carpenter was really pissed off about, at that time,
Yeah,
we should all still be pissed about 40 years later, and I know, I think there's something to be said about the fact that where most people are most people would agree on, almost 90% of things in the world, and most people would get along very, very fine if not for the fact that we're really told to dislike each other and distrust each other, and we're all very easily influenced, I think, and to a great frustration. So obviously, I think part of what we were kind of trying to dig at with test screening as well is to sort of say, you have a pastor who, like, he's a pastor, but he's kind of realizing his daughter might be gay, but he's trying to find a loophole for her, and then you have a dad
yeah,
who's like, the world's more dangerous than but he's not wrong, he's not wrong, but
yeah,
within these kind of human frailties, evil can really capitalize and they can go in and they can do some serious fucking damage.
yeah.
Anyway, not to like get on a soapbox about it, but that's kind of that's
No,
that's the that's the sandbox.
it's great, and it's interesting too watching the film because I think that there was one of kind of two ways that you could go with the malevolent force, and it's government or it's big business. And that
Hmm.
seems to be that. So it's an interesting choice that you went with government because funnily enough, prior to watching uh, One Battle After Another, I would have said that government don't have the muscle to pull this kind of stuff off anymore, and it's all whaling corporations from here on in, and that's where it's going to go. And then watching that, you're like, oh no, there's still it's like the government is a sleeping giant. It just because it hasn't been necessarily, it bows to the pressure of big business here and there, and with putting plastics into food and all sorts of whatever your kind of anti-government grudge kind of is, like they're there, but or corporate grudge, the government are kind of there in the background rubbing their hands together because they're making some lovely tax dollars out of it. But
Right.
it is a very but they are so now you don't even think that they care enough to to do it. But they're now watching this and watching watching One Battle After Another. You're like, no, they totally they got the juice. That juice is there.
They do, and you definitely get into real trouble when they realize that if they work together, they can be incredibly effective.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, isn't that the definition of fascism? Isn't fascism essentially state-directed control of the economy and working with the cornerstones of economy, which are these giant corporations I mean, yeah, when corporate and governmental interests align, you're in big trouble, I
You're in
think,
big
as
trouble.
as a
Yeah.
people, unless you have the right kind of government, which is
Yeah.
like whoever has that. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. I don't know if
I
they can
think
exist anymore, the right kind of government, because yeah, they're too busy getting elected to be able to get past that. But
I don't know if it's ever been anything but that, frankly, at this
yeah,
point, you know,
yeah,
but the best you can do. But, you know, but yes, I mean, it's obviously, you know, there's a lot of grievances. There's a lot of valid grievances we have. And sometimes the best way to grieve on them is to put them into a story.
into a
So,
story. I mean, look, one of my favorite lines in cinema of all time is that scene in Hunt for Red October, where the what's his the is the director of defense or whatever it is. He says, you know, I'm a politician, so when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their candy. And I'm like, that is the greatest, one of the greatest lines ever written. You know,
that's pretty good.
in a movie ever.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, definitely skepticism is healthy. And
Yeah,
that was always, you know, that was always a real Carpenter thing. I was
yeah,
always really enamored of his I don't even call it cynicism. I think he just, you know, he was very rightfully skeptical of authority.
yeah, yeah.
We tried to get him in to do the movie. Actually, it was funny because the first scenes that I ever wrote were the thing, and then and Reels performing the thing because they sent the movie back, and so Carpenter's DNA was always a big part of it, and so we tried. We actually the role of the movie theater, the older guy who runs the theater, I wrote for John,
Wow,
in the hopes that we could get him to do it, and it wasn't going to happen.
that would have been
Um,
amazing.
but yeah, the movie is very very much a love letter to him, no doubt.
Now, before we wrap things up, I've got two more questions. Uh, and the second last one is if somebody was basing their entire Monster Fest experience on just going to see test screening and they're not watching anything else at the festival, what five movies would you recommend they watch to get in the mood for test screening?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Huh. Five movies to get in the mood for test screening. Well, I mean, I'd have to say The Thing for sure. Um, I feel like Crazies or Society would, or maybe both, maybe on the list. Oh wow, this is a tough one. I don't know. Um,
I mean, I completely, yeah, you got to get some shunting in there. Uh,
somewhat,
some shunting. There's a,
some Shantae.
I don't think that there is a movie in existence that you shouldn't watch Society to get into the mood for.
I mean, it's a great appetizer for quite for anything. That's
For
totally
anything,
true.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's hard because like there's so many movies for me that had an influence, like Body Snatchers, but I don't know if they necessarily are like a good prerequisite. I don't know. What do you have any that you're thinking of that we could add to my three?
Well, Impulse,
Hmm.
which I already mentioned. I think that's a great
Yeah.
film which yeah, yeah, which before recently I hadn't seen, and then watching it going, this is, you know, this is amazing. Yeah, now you've thrown it back at me, and
It's tough. It's tough
yeah.
because like there's so many that we've talked about,
Yeah.
but they're not they're kind of my
I mean,
influences, you
the
know.
Abel Ferrara Body Snatchers would be a great one to kind of watch because that
Mm,
is
yeah.
very much that kind of that family dynamic within that military base is super interesting, and that, you know, when you know start to notice that there's something wrong, when when you get out of your head to the point where you notice that there's something wrong with your family, that
Hmm.
you know, because you're so wrapped up in your own problems that all of a sudden you're like, hang on a second, mum and dad are they're a bit friskier than normal. What are they doing in the in the makeout
Yeah,
room?
that is a really good one. That's true because we have a protagonist who is very, very focused on her own dramatic question, and the audience has an enormous amount of dramatic irony. Like we're way ahead of her. Is
Yeah,
she just not seeing what we see kind of? So by the time she sees it, she's really, you know, she's behind the eight ball a bit.
yeah,
So yeah, that is a good one. Um,
yeah,
yeah. If I think of any others, I'll send them your way. But
yeah,
that's a really great question. But I also think if having seen the movies that are on the slate for Monster Fest, if test screening is the only one they're going to go see, I mean, A, thank you, but B, go see more because wow, what a great lineup you guys have.
yeah. Thank you very much. We there were there was a plethora to choose from this year. Which is not the case every year. We had a real amount of trouble narrowing it down to the films that we ended up playing. So
Mm.
yeah, we're really proud of the program. So yeah, I hope people do see
It's a
more than
killer program, man. I was really
yeah.
hoping I could come down for it. I can't, I couldn't manage it, but it's such a great, and I love also that you're moving it around. You're moving it around cities so that you can really get some great, some great exposure so people that can't make it physically the first weekend can see it maybe in their local. So that's awesome.
Yeah, because like Australia is so large that you can't expect people to travel. Uh, it takes it takes just as long to get to New Zealand as it does to get from Melbourne to New Zealand. I think it's actually quicker to get to New Zealand, a whole separate country, than it does to get from Melbourne to Perth, which is on the other side,
That's on the other side of the country,
on
right?
the other
Perth
side
is
of
on
the
the West
country.
Coast, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll take the films to them. And my last question, just to wrap things up, is: have you seen anything good lately?
Oh man. Well, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that you just referenced is something I'm kind of dying to see. I've been hearing really, really great things about it, so I'm planning on going tonight or tomorrow. Um, I just saw Weapons, which is so cool. I mean, I almost kind of ruined the experience for myself because I'd read the script and I was watching it going like, fuck, I shouldn't have read the script because like it's that fractured narrative is so much about like just the surprise after surprise after surprise that because I had read it and I knew what was coming, it kind of like it took the wind out of it for me. But it was still, I think, it's a delight to see that Hollywood is making weirder and weirder and weirder genre movies,
Yeah,
and people are going to see them because like that's so important to keep horror vital is this reminder that it doesn't have to be based on IP. It doesn't have to be a sequel. It doesn't have to be a remake. Um, you can make a movie for less than $10 million and it can make $100 million. Like,
yeah,
so that one was exciting, not just creatively, but it's the kind of thing that you want Hollywood to kind of see and be like, yes, we need to keep spending money on filmmakers who come in out of the box with a crazy idea because
yeah.
the audience is there and they're thirsty and they want to see something they've never seen before.
And
So,
and I would argue best chase scene in a movie since Bullet. That scene at the end.
yeah, like actually, yeah, two kind of really cool
Yeah,
chasing. Actually.
yeah. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And
Well, I had what was the other one that I mentioned? Um, Strange Darling.
yeah,
Which was so cool. I haven't seen Long Walk yet, and I'm really excited to because I think he's such a fascinating
yeah,
filmmaker. But I'd seen Strange Darling doing the festival circuit, and similarly, like the fractured narrative brought a really interesting energy to that story.
yeah. Long Walk is great too. Yeah, I managed to see that
Oh,
uh, a little while ago, and I didn't, I'd no, I hadn't read the Stephen King novel that it's based on, or the Richard Bachman novel. I didn't read the synopsis going in. I didn't know anything about it, and it blew me away. And it made
wow.
me really want to go back and watch. They shoot horses, don't they?
Yeah, seriously.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, I'd recommend you find a copy of the Bachman books, because so that just to go back, that script I told you I was reading in college and I read my first screenplay and I adapt was the first one I adapted. That was the very first Bachman book. It was a book called Rage,
right?
and it's harder to find now because King took it out of print because it involves a school shooting. Um, but the Bachman books are just, I'm a King junkie. But those books to me are so incredible. I think they're some of his best stuff, it's almost from my perspective like he was writing about the stuff that really scares him about society, and he was so ahead of the curve, man. In The Running Man, he totally foresaw reality television.
Yeah,
Um, there's one that I almost got done with Frank Darabont. We got really close to getting it made called Road Work, which takes place in 72 and is about someone who's getting forced out of his house. And I mean, it's just these really deep character studies about frustration and society and oh. man, it's fucking great stuff. I mean, I'd recommend you find a copy, and I think you would love them.
Yeah, yeah, got to track it down. It was actually funny that you mentioned when I pulled out those Brother Voodoo comics and I was having a look at them again because I hadn't read them in years. And I remember when I first saw them, I remember thinking, "Oh, it's Bernie Casey from Running Man.
Yeah.
Like this is him. Like he's got the haircut, the hairstyle and everything." And it was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's a
are you
really
looking?
fascinating character.
Yeah, are you looking forward to the new the Edgar Wright Running Man that's about
Well,
to?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
It's funny because at first I was hoping that it would be more of a the King's. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything from the Bachman books, but the King version is definitely more bleak. Um, it doesn't the sense of humor is far more critical. And obviously seeing the trailer was like, okay, this is more like the 80s version where it's kind of it's brought into like a hyperbolic sort of vehicle. But it looks great, man. And Edgar Wright is wow. I mean, kind of perfect. And
Yeah.
great casting too. I mean, it looks like it's gonna be it looks like it's gonna be a knockout. I hope it is. I don't know anybody that's seen it. I haven't heard about it yet,
Yeah.
but
No,
yeah.
no, I think that one's going to be I get to go to every now and then I get to go to a media screening of things, and I think that one's going to be like the day before,
Oh, okay.
so no one can spoil anything uh, with it.
Well, I
So
can tell you the one I'm most excited about seeing in the near future, besides the Paul Thomas Anderson one, is Tron, because 1982 is when Tron came out. We actually had a Tron reference in test screening, but we had to take it out because we couldn't license it. Um, and because I brought my son when he was 3 to see Tron Legacy in the movie theater. Um, and now Tron Ares is coming out, and he saw the trailer and he's like, "Dad, we have to go opening night." So I'm kind of excited. I'm fingers crossed, man. I hope
yeah.
I hope it's
Well,
I don't know, was Tron special to you at all?
oh, incredibly special.
Yeah.
The first time, my first ever visit to the US was to go to Comic Con, the San Diego Comic Con, and Cindy Morgan was there, and
Oh, wow. Oh man.
there
So
with a friend of
cool.
mine, and she's like, I can always pick my fans, like they only know me from two films, and it's either Caddyshack or Tron, and she's like, yeah,
Shaggertron.
she's like, I could tell, yeah, I was there with a friend of mine later. She's like, definitely Caddyshack, definitely Tron.
Funny.
You're like, well,
You, you could probably see you like a mile away, know which category you're in,
yeah,
right?
which one? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, that movie was so great, man. 1982. That Poltergeist. I mean, what a year, right? What a year.
Yeah, yeah, and Creep Show. So many great. Like we started this thing as a weird digression that Glenn will cut out. We started this thing where we do on the show where we just go through year by year and talk about all the films that came out and try and pick each other's favorite film of that year.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
we started with 82, and it was like we kind of realized straight away like how this was supposed to be like a 5 minute little throwaway bit, but it's just the two of us just going, what about this one, what about this one, oh, and this one came out, what about this one, and we got to the point now where I think this week is like 2011 or 2012, I can't remember which, and we thought it was going to die off by about 2002. We'd have run out of things to get excited about, and it has not happened. Like we're
It's a good
still,
sign.
yeah,
That's a good sign, right?
yeah. There's still great stuff. But 1982, that was a tough year.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
86, 88, like the entire 80s is really difficult.
Yeah. I don't, it's so funny. Like people kind of overlook the 80s. They kind of brush it off and it's like, oh no. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. And it was the same for like the 90s. My wife is actually, she's a novelist and she's writing a book about cinema in 1999. And you look at that year and you look at every weekend, the movies that came out in 99, and it's just like, wow. I mean, what a year. And it feels like it feels like we're coming back to that. It feels like we've had a little bit of a patch where there's maybe like 5 or 6 movies a year I'm excited about, but man, I love that feeling 'cause that was how I grew up with movies. With every weekend, it was like, which of the 3 movies that just came out should we go see?
Yeah, yeah,
And I want that like creative fertility to come back to Hollywood,
yeah. Yeah. instead of making one $400 million movie, make 50 $10 million movies, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. There are
I'm
people
like,
holding that flame. There are people holding
yeah,
that flame, and I hope Hollywood comes back to that. I really do.
yeah. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. That was fantastic. I had a great time. I hope you did too.
Oh man, it was so great talking to you. And I'm sorry Glenn couldn't join us, but give him a hug for me. And
Uh,
maybe next time around we'll get a chance to chat.
yeah,
But yeah, that was a blast.
definitely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Take a deep breath. Close your eyes. And listen.
Penny, I know that you want to escape just as bad as I do.
They're coming.
Who? Who's coming?
Hollywood.
Nobody knows what kind of movie it is. Real says they're always secretive.
Which means they have something to hide. It's Star Wars Part 3, Revenge of the Jedi!
They're filming that still.
We're gonna know for sure come Wednesday at 7.
I have to show you something. You have to see to understand.
Did something happen last night?
What's wrong, Mommy?
The world changes around us so very quickly. And believe me, you have no idea what's coming.
So tell me, what's coming?